You know that feeling when you're too young for one group but too old for another? Like you remember blowing into Nintendo cartridges to make them work, but you also remember downloading songs on Napster for 3 hours. You remember having to actually wait for your favorite show to come on TV at exactly 8 p.m. on Friday. But you also figured out how to stream movies before your parents did. If you were born between 1976 and 1985, psychologists have a name for you. They call you Xennials, or the Oregon Trail generation. And here's the thing, researchers are actually fascinated by this tiny group, not because you're better than anyone else, but because you lived through something no generation ever has before.
Let's rewind for a second. Imagine being a kid in the 1980s. Your world was small, in a good way. You had 3 TV channels, maybe 4 if the antenna worked right. If you missed an episode of He-Man or the Smurfs, too bad, it was gone forever. Poof, like it never existed. You wanted to call your friend? You had to memorize their phone number and hope no one in their house was using the landline. And if their mom answered first, you had to have actual manners and have a whole conversation with her before even asking for your friend.
Remember cassette tapes? When your favorite tape got chewed up in your Walkman, you had to carefully unwind it with a pencil, then flatten out the creases with your fingernail, then pray it wouldn't get eaten again. That wasn't frustrating back then. That was just Tuesday. And boredom? Oh man, boredom was a whole different thing. There was no phone to scroll, no TikTok to open. You just sat there with your thoughts until you got creative enough to find something to do. You built forts, you rode bikes until the streetlights came on. You showed up at your friend's house without texting first, and if they weren't home, you just went to the next friend's house. That required something we don't really talk about anymore, trust. You trusted your friends would be there. They trusted you'd show up. Then everything changed. And we're not talking about a slow, gentle change. We're talking about a total rewrite of how life works. If you're in this group, here's what your late teens and 20s looked like. You started with Friendster, then MySpace, then Facebook. You remember when having a profile picture was a whole production, when poking someone was actually a thing people did. You remember the sound of dial-up internet, that horrible screeching noise that meant you were finally connecting to the world, but also meant no one could use the phone. You remember printing out MapQuest directions before going on a road trip? Stacks of paper, and if you missed a turn, you were just lost. No GPS to save you, no rerouting voice, just you, a paper map you couldn't read while driving, and the growing dread that you'd be driving in circles for the next hour. You remember when getting a song meant waiting for it to come on the radio, hitting record on your cassette deck at exactly the right moment, and hoping the DJ would shut up before the singing started. Here's where it gets scientifically interesting. Your brain was still growing during this whole wild ride. The front part, the prefrontal cortex, the part that helps you adapt and learn new stuff, keeps developing until you're about 25. So when the world went from analog to digital practically overnight, your brain was in the perfect spot. You were young enough that picking up new technology felt natural, but you were also old enough to remember exactly what life was like before. Think of it like being bilingual, but instead of speaking 2 languages, you speak 2 worlds. You can have a real conversation with someone without checking your phone every 10 seconds. But you also don't panic when your work introduces new software. You just figure it out. You remember what it felt like to be genuinely unreachable, like no one could get a hold of you for hours. And that was normal. That was fine. The world didn't end. Here's something deeper, though. Your embarrassing moments, they just faded away. That terrible haircut in 7th grade, the awkward phase where you dressed like a total weirdo, the cringy thing you said at that party, no photo evidence, no screenshots, nothing saved forever. It just lived in people's memories. And memories, they change, they soften, they turn into stories that make people laugh instead of cringe. Psychologists call this autobiographical memory, and it turns out your brain is actually designed to let things fade, to keep what matters and quietly drop the rest. But when everything is documented forever, when every stupid thing you did at 15 is still floating around the internet somewhere,
that natural process gets messed up. Okay, here's the part nobody talks about. Right when you were supposed to be starting your career, getting your first real job, building something stable, the economy completely crashed. 2008, the financial crisis. A lot of you graduated into a world where there were simply no jobs, or you got laid off right when you were finally getting started. Research shows that kind of financial trauma at exactly that age. It sticks with you. It changes how you think about money forever. Even after things get better, part of you is always waiting for it to fall apart again. So now you've got this group of people who learn to adapt to massive technological change, who can roll with pretty much anything, but who also got burned right when they were trying to build stability. You can handle change because you had to, but there's this quiet voice in the back of your head going, what if it all goes away again? Here's what makes Xennials genuinely interesting to researchers. You hold contradictions that don't even feel like contradictions to you. You're independent as heck. Your parents probably didn't know where you were for hours at a time when you were a kid. You learned to solve your own problems, to deal with boredom without an adult fixing it for you, to figure things out on your own. But you also grew up right when the internet was this exciting new thing that was going to connect everyone and make the world better, before we all realized, well, you know. So you ended up being independent, but also cooperative, skeptical, but also kind of optimistic, comfortable with digital stuff, but also remembering analog stuff. You can see what was gained, and you can also see what was lost. And something was lost. You lost the ability to just be alone with your thoughts without reaching for a phone. You lost the patience that came from waiting for things, waiting for your favorite song on the radio, waiting for your friend to call back, waiting for Friday night's TV show. You lost a certain kind of presence, that feeling of being somewhere without 20 other things competing for your attention. But you also gained stuff, connection to people far away, information at your fingertips, possibilities your 10-year-old self literally could not have imagined.
If you're in this group, you probably know the feeling. Too young for some conversations, too old for others, not quite fitting anywhere. Here's the thing though, that's not a flaw. That's actually the whole point. In a world that keeps changing faster than anyone can keep up with, you've already lived through one complete rewrite of how life works, and you came out the other side still standing. That adaptability, that ability to hold two different worlds in your head at the same time, that's not nothing. The Oregon Trail generation learned something that the rest of us are still trying to figure out: how to change without losing yourself in the process. You remember what it was like before, and you figured out how to live in the after. That's not being stuck between two worlds. That's being fluent in both.